As we slide into the end of the decade, there's no better time to reflect on what has become the beloved American pastime, Broadway. As you folks may know, these golden years have seen record attendance to the musicals and plays we all know and love. Just 2 years ago, over 20 million people attended a Broadway show in the lovely city of New York. Many of these attendees were not the business tycoons and old money families you used to see head off to the theater in their most decadent clothing, but the families of your average Joe, people just like you and me, folks. Many were attracted by those songs we all know and love from only the greatest musicals that we know you've heard on the radio or played at home on your pianos. As our economy has experienced its record boom over these past years, more and more people have reaped the benefits, finding tickets to see musicals well within their budgets to be a treat for the whole family. And boy, did the fruits of hot-selling tickets pay off. Shows received so much profit that as we've moved through this decade, sets and theaters have become more elaborate than ever. But enough about the background business. Let's delve deeper into the Broadway world, starting with its famous theaters. Ah, the theaters of Broadway, the physical representation of that great and happy spirit we all feel when we see a show. In this decade, the number of theaters on Broadway has increased dramatically, totaling 30 theaters, with 16 of them being built just this decade. As musicals have become more and more popular through the many decades since the first long-running musical, The Elves, in 1857, Broadway has seen more and more musical productions. The theaters notable for these productions are the Alvin Theater, the Winter Garden Theater, built exclusively for musical productions, the Ambassador Theater, and the Broadway Theater. As you may be able to tell, we can thank the Schubert brothers for the access to the pleasure of Broadway musicals. Over the past 2 decades, the brothers have built their theater empire, accumulating 86 theaters in the U.S. alone by 1924. Although the theaters where our beloved musicals are held are important to the picture, I know it's the great musicals of this decade you really want to hear about. Here they are, some of the greatest musicals of the Roaring '20s. Of course, you will have heard of these before, folks. And if you haven't, have you been living under a rock? In all seriousness, if you don't know about them, that's probably why you're here.
But first, let's look back through the decades as we examine some of the best composers America has to offer. For example, George and Ira Gershwin, a pair of brilliant New York-born composers. Born in 1898 and 1896, they were some of the most popular and successful on Broadway this past decade. Their music has recently been seen in stunning musicals such as Lady Be Good, OK, and Funny Face.
Another composer making our list is Jerome Kern, known for the hit musical Sally. Born in New York in 1885, Kern's work is some of the best on display. Speaking of the best on display, where would we be without the fantastic musicals and stars headlining New York's biggest attraction? Follow us through the decade as we discuss what we've selected as the 3 best musicals of the decade so far. First up is Sally, a classic tale starring Marilyn Miller with music by Jerome Kern. Marilyn Miller was born in Evansville, Indiana, into a family with a vaudeville act. She toured the Midwestern Europe before finally arriving on Broadway. Sally was her first true starring role and has since catapulted her to fame. Sally was one of the first great musicals of the 20th century, coming out in 1920. This tale tells the charming rags-to-riches story of a dishwasher who takes hold of the opportunity of the century and rises up to become a ballerina in the Ziegfeld Follies. Produced by the ingenious Florence Ziegfeld, this musical premiered at the New Amsterdam Theater and ran for a whopping 570 performances. Next up is the charming Lady Be Good, starring America's favorite brother and sister duo of Fred and Adele Astaire. The Astaire siblings were born in Nebraska and began a wildly popular vaudeville act at a young age. They've since become Broadway regulars, but Lady Be Good was just their second major Broadway show. The musical tells a tale of a down-on-their-luck brother and sister dance team that get wound up in a plot of millionaires and romance. It opened at the Liberty Theater and received smash reviews, running for 330 performances. This musical also featured music by the famed Gershwin brothers and was so popular that it wound up putting on a performance in London with the same 2 stars. And finally, we have one of the first sensational all-African-American musical revues of the 20th century. The first African American musical to tour white theaters, this story tells the comical tale of a pair of crooked mayoral candidates in an election. After one wins, he appoints the other his chief of police, but after disagreeing on several matters, they must settle their differences in a long comedic fight. This comical tale premiered on Daly's 63rd Street Theater and marked a breakthrough of African American talent on the big stage. After Shuffle Along premiered, 9 African American musicals opened in just 3 years. Well, that's all the time we have today, folks. Here's to the incredible talent on Broadway and the surefire talent that will entertain us for years to come.